it's an action, right? It's not just a word or a definition. There's an action to it. And for me, authenticity is a daily decision to show up, be seen, be heard for exactly who I am, right? Is an action, a decision we make daily, right? Whether it's conscious or unconscious, we make a decision every day about how to navigate and show up in the world. And for me, I make the daily decision to show and be myself, to be authentic, whether it means I'm wearing a dress, nails, makeup, heels, whether that means I'm wearing, I never wear baggy, I never wear sweatpants, don't touch me. I don't wear sweatpants, but if I'm dressed down, like whatever my version of dressed down is, which usually some yoga pants or something like that, that's my dressed down version, right? But I always show up authentically as myself. And it's not always easy, but it's a daily decision I make. And I started making that decision back in 2012 when I almost died of alcohol poisoning.
Talk to me before that experience. Why did you not feel comfortable making that decision to be yourself?
To give you some context, I grew up where Victor Cruz and Fetty Wap are from. So Paterson, New Jersey.
Shout out to Jersey.
Shout out to Jersey. You know, I'm a Jersey boy. For those who don't know, Paterson is the third largest city, I believe, in New Jersey, the first industrial city in America. And we are riddled with crime, addiction, and all these other things that you kind of see in inner cities. But I feel like Paterson is the one city, and Camden, that hasn't folded gentrification. And I'm very proud of that. Like Newark and Jersey City, they're unrecognizable at this point. You know, some parts of them are just so unrecognizable, especially Jersey City. So I grew up in an area where either you made it out or you went underground, and now they're a live kind, right? And so I saw people, you know, get killed and experience violence and addiction and all these things. And I knew from a young age, I started writing poetry in third grade, and I won my first poetry contest in fourth grade, I think. So I always knew that writing was going to be my ticket out. From a young age, I would just write and write and write. And so poetry, music, essays, I just knew I was a writer. And I went to Performing Arts High School for creative writing communications, where I studied creative writing, journalism, and mass media. And so at the Performing Arts High School in Paterson, Rosa Parks, I also began my dance journey. I started training in dance and minoring in dance my senior year. And my mentor, Erin Pride, just took me under her wing, right? And I was her first disabled student. My mom gave birth to me at 5.5 months. I weighed 1 pound. And because of my birth circumstances, I developed something called cerebral palsy, which is, if you ever, it runs on a spectrum, but it affects me from the hips down. So after years of therapy and surgery and dance, my mobility has drastically improved.
It's fascinating that you at an early age gravitated towards the arts, dance, film, production, all of those kind of things, right? I mean, at least when I was growing up, I grew up in what I would call the hood, in the projects. I didn't see many people gravitate towards the arts. Like when you think about quote unquote getting out, either sports or academics, did you feel supported growing up when you were going into the arts?
Funny, my mom didn't want me to go to Performing Arts High School because I think at the time she was questioning my sexuality before I was ready to come out. And that had a reputation of being the gay school where all the gay kids went, because obviously the creative arts, and in her defense, there were a lot of gay people at that school. You know, there are some who are still repressed, but that's another conversation. But you know, Fetty Wap was a rapper, right? And he is a rapper, and he's from my hometown. And you know, you became a rapper or you became an athlete. Now, I'm talented in many ways. Rapping ain't one of them, right? So I'm not even gonna front. I knew that wasn't an option for me. Athletics, I mean, I'm a dancer, I'm a choreographer. I feel it's very athletic, but it's not like I'm going to a professional association to be an athlete. So that wasn't an option for me. And so like, what do I have left, right? What are my other options? I did with North Jersey Media Group, diversity and journalism program. And so I started getting publication clippings or published in local newspapers in New Jersey while I was in high school. And so, you know, I knew that was going to take me somewhere. And so when I did my summer internship at the North Jersey Media Group, the Bergen Record, one of the senior editors looked at my high school clips and my current record clips, and she was like, you know, you don't have what it takes to, she just straight out told me, like, I don't think you have what it takes. And it was so crushing because my dream at that point was to go to college, get a degree in journalism, and become a New York Times reporter. That was my dream. And when she said that to me, it devastated me. Actually, it's the one time I allowed someone to crush my dream.
Why do you think you allowed it at the time?
Well, because she was respected in the field, she was respected in the office, and you know, I just assumed that I didn't have what it took. I still went to college for journalism, right? So I did I did a double major in women's and gender studies and journalism, and then a minor in PR. And so because I was there in college for about 4 years at that point, and I was maybe like anywhere between 9 to 15 credits away from finishing my journalism degree. And I made the decision to drop it so I can hurry up and graduate. It became extremely difficult to stay focused in school when my career was taking off. So by the time I got to college, I already had publications under my name. I had my dance company. I brought my dance company in residency at the university to get funding and support. And by 2011, after my first year in college, we did our first full length production in a real theater that raised over $1,000 for an autism organization in New Jersey. And so, my career was really taking off. By the time I got to my junior year in college, I already got the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Student Government Association. I had already spoke at Harvard, MIT, NYU, and Rutgers and other universities around the region. And I was already guest lecturing in my professor's other classes, right? Which I thought was ironic because so when my dream of being a journalist kind of fizzled away, and I got better as a journalist, in college, obviously with more training, but I realized that journalism, being a New York Times reporter, was out of reach.
Can you think of another time when someone tried to crush your dream or challenge it?
Yeah.
And then I'm wondering.
And it was my guidance counselor, who shall remain nameless because I do care about her, and she did apologize. But she had told me around the time I was applying for college, as a disabled person who didn't have a lot of formal dance training, I knew I wasn't going to go to college for dance. I knew I didn't have the technique and the experience needed to get a dance degree. But I knew I was gonna keep working with my dance company and do my journalism and my writing and all that. And so she told me when I was applying for college, Mark, you're gonna have to decide what you really want to do with your life. You're gonna have to decide if you want to be a writer, or if you want to be a dancer, choreographer. She was like, you can't do it all. And I straight up told her, I was like, yes, I can, right? I was like, not only will I do it. And so years later, I went back to my high school to visit her and visit other people. And at that point, I was choreographing work at the high school as an alumni and in college and getting published in different places. And I said to her, do you remember that conversation we had when I was a senior? Do you remember how you told me I had to choose between writing or dance? I was like, I think I'm doing pretty well for myself now. And she apologized, and she, and I can tell that she felt some kind of way about that moment, because she was like, she could have deterred me, right? She was supposed to guide me as a guidance counselor, and she could have deterred me from developing this entrepreneurial, multifaceted career that I have now. And so it was after that record experience that I really shifted my perception about what I can do and who I can be.
What gave you the confidence to, at that point, to say, because in the first experience, if someone tells you something about your potential in journalism and you take it at face value, you put them on a pedestal, as we all do, right? We're like, oh my God, this person knows way more than I do. Yeah, there's an expert. Like, I'm just starting. You know what? Yeah, you know what? You're right. I'm not made for journalism, right? But then you have this other experience where you're like, no, you're wrong. I know what I'm doing. Like, what gave you the confidence to stand up for yourself and what you believed in and what you wanted to do?
I think at that point I led the first student walkout. Former Governor Chris Christie was proposing a lot of cuts to arts education and across the state of New Jersey. And I led the first walkout, at least that I can remember in my recent history, of a student walkout to protest his budget cuts. And I remember we got press attention. And I love our principal, Sharon Smith. She's the principal with principles. And she, that was her tagline. And she said, and the school's tagline, the school's motto was, and it was really birthed by her, failure is not an option. And in high school, I took that as like, you're right, failure is not an option. Of course, years later, I look back at that statement, I'm like, actually, there could be no creativity or innovation without failure, right? But when you're a high school student and you hear someone say, and she meant it in a way to motivate us to keep going. And, I remember her saying that to me. And at that point, I had graduated high school with a 2.0, if that. My first 2 years were really difficult. I, transitioning from middle school to high school. I was the chubby, braces wearing, glasses wearing, crippled kid. And I was just coming out with my sexuality and trying to figure out what that was. And my brother had been murdered my freshman year of high school. And I remember it really rocking my world. And I went into a deep depression and grief. And it's amazing looking back at some of those old pieces that I wrote in that time. They were so dark. They were so dark that like my school teacher was like, go to guidance counselor. She was like, you have to talk to someone. And it was during that time of grief that I was sitting in the back of the theater watching the dancers rehearse. And that's when I realized I want to be on stage. I want to perform. And, I don't know, had he not been murdered, where I would have been in my career, because that really lit a fire under me. Again, to make it out, to change my circumstances, to get educated, to and so my first 2 years, my first 2 years of high school, the grades were dismal. It was just bad. And then by the time I pulled up the grades in junior and senior year, you know, I just made it. Colleges weren't accepting me, and the only college to accept me was William Paterson University through their Education Opportunity Fund program, which is for low-income students in the state of New Jersey. I think New York calls it EOP.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm a first generation high school graduate, first generation college graduate. Where I come from, I knew education would help me, right? And so I think the confidence I was developing was really, it felt like do or die for me. It felt like if I don't go to college, if I don't make it to college, if I don't start my career, I'm never gonna make it out of here. And I felt desperate to get out. I felt desperate to make it, whatever that means. And fast forward to 2015, I'm flown out to LA for the reveal of my campaign, my national campaign with AIDS Healthcare Foundation. They did a thing called Somos, which is a campaign they did featuring Latinx people in the LGBT community and outside the LGBT community. And so it featured me, Zoe Luna, the young trans Latina actress who was in the remake of The Craft most recently, and the undocumented lawyer who sued President Obama, Sergio Garcia. So, you know, I had never really met these people before the photo shoot. And then once I learned their stories, I was like, and you picked me to join them? Like, you know, because Zoe was really breaking ground for young trans people of color. And her mother was doing a lot of advocacy work as a parent. You know, we had Jazz Jennings, but, you know, she wasn't a person of color. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's so much nuance around that.
Yeah.
And so, and then Sergio, you know, to be undocumented and to go through that plight of like suing the president, suing the government to get his right to get a law license and all that. Like it was just fantastic. So I thought I was in the wrong crowd. I got picked by accident. And the Imposter Syndrome. Yeah. And it was a moment. I've had many moments where I thought, wow, I made something of myself. But that was the first time that I saw a physical representation of making it, which was when I was on a billboard in LA and in various parts of LA. And Fetty Wap was also on a billboard in LA. And I saw Fetty Wap, and then a mile or two down, I saw my billboard. And I was like, yo, two people from Paterson just out here on these billboards. And I was on billboards all across New York City and Miami and LA. And I was like, oh damn. So this little brown kid who's queer and crippled from Paterson, he's on billboards, you know, in major cities across the US. I was like, this is important, right? And it was about storytelling. It was about telling my story, right? And so, yeah, that's some of the experience I've had. It just, you know, I think it's just really important for young people and for people of color and people who are marginalized to think about, because often we're told, and I know you talk a lot about this as well in your work, you know, we're told that we have to be a certain way or do a certain thing or act a certain way to get these corporate jobs or to fit in or to be successful. And I have, over the last, you know, knock on wood, I would say at least over the last decade, I've been able to establish my brand and my career, not always under my terms and under my conditions that I would ideally like, but I've been able to build a career for myself rooted in my authenticity. My first boss, an Afro-Latina Dominican from the Bronx in New York City at John Jay, Roseanne, shout out to Roseanne Santos. Hey. She was like, I don't believe people can be their best selves if they can't be their authentic selves at work. And the reason why she said that to me on my first day at the job was because throughout the interview process, I wore a suit and tie. I was conforming. You know, it was the first and last time I conformed for a job. No, actually, no. That was the first time that I actually got the job that I conformed. And then I conformed like 2 years into the role to apply for another university in Jersey City. And I felt uncomfortable.
In what way did you conform when you
suit
entered?
And tie. Suit and tie. Like I don't do suit and ties. Like that's never been me. You know, that's never been my thing. And so,
but what else?
You know,
I'm sure was it just a suit and tie? Was it like the color of the suit? Was it the makeup?
It was all black.
It
was all, okay, so this is gonna be funny.
Did you wear earrings? Like what did you
no, I don't wear earrings. I don't have a piercing.
Okay, don't have piercing.
Okay. Yeah, I don't like earrings on myself. I like it on other people, but not myself.
Did you show off the tattoos? I mean, there's so many things.
Yeah, I have so many tattoos. At that point, I didn't have as many tattoos. So I didn't have the chest one. But I was fully covered up. I was wearing a white button up, black blazer, black suit pants, black dress socks, black shoes, and a tie. I think the tie I had on was either black. I think for the first round of interviews, I did a black tie. And then for the second round of interviews, I did like a different color shirt. and a purple tie or something like that.
And was this your first like?
So John Jay was my first full-time role. That wasn't my dance company. It wasn't, my other projects. And so during my interview process, I told Rosanna, I was like, listen, I'm gender non-conforming. And she's, I don't really know what that means. And I was like, I just don't dress like this. I was like, I wear, dresses and skirts and heels and makeup. And I was told when I went to John Jay, because John Jay has a reputation of being a police school, criminal justice school, right? And at the time, it was very seen as a very suit and tie thing. There wasn't a lot of clear visibility at the campus. And so a former colleague of mine at William Paterson told me, take your nails off. Now, for anyone who's listening to this, who gets their nails done, who does acrylic, y'all know how expensive that crap is. You don't have to, and it was a fresh set. It wasn't like, I had it for a month or so or two, and I had to replace it anyways. This is a brand new set. There was no way in hell I was taking my nails off for a job interview for a job I might not even get. But they were like a nude color, and they were really square and short. But I didn't wear makeup. And it was the summertime, so I'm glad I didn't wear makeup. It would have been melting off in New York City in August. And so, but I wore a suit and tie and all that, right?
This was during the interview. They told you to take your nails off?
No, but as I was getting ready to do the interview, my colleague at William Paterson University told me to take my nails off. Like I shouldn't do my nails because it may distract or count against me. Now, remember, this is 2015, right? So it's not like as progressive or visible as trans and gender nonconforming people are, or non-binary people are today. It wasn't as visible back then. Yes, we had the tipping point with Laverne Cox. Yes, Janet Mock came out, but this is like long before cultural acceptance was at a higher rate. And so the norm was you conform to when you want to get that job, you conform. And so this is before, cultural attitudes of trans and non-conforming people were, more improved across the country. Now, in the time of this recording we're doing, there are several bills being passed across the country, Florida, Texas, various other states, where they're banning the teachers from talking about LGBTQ issues in schools, right?
I saw, yeah.
And also they're banning in Texas, they're trying to make it so parents who give gender affirming care to their trans children can be charged with a felony and convicted of a crime. And so, and not to get political on your podcast, but
Let's do it.
I think it's really important when we talk about authenticity, how, especially where I grew up, people say, yo, be real, yo, like be you, right? But that always came with conditions.
Yeah.
Yo, be you, be real, meant behave in a way in which I expect you to.
And I think people also don't realize that like there are policies in place, whether they be unspoken or actual in law, that prevent us from being ourselves. To your point, right? Like if there's a law in place that says like if you self-identify as queer and you show that visibly, I can legally fire you, something like that, right?
Yeah, there's no federal equal. There's no federal law that bans discrimination against LGBTQ people. Some states have it in place, but it's not widespread. And in many states, you can still be fired for being queer or trans. You can be kicked out of housing for being queer or trans. You will experience, in some cases, medical discrimination. And so there's a lot of things happening in the queer community. And, I wrote about this around 2013 when the Supreme Court ruled that Section 3 of DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, was discriminatory against queer couples, LGBTQ people. I said, what the hell do I care about marriage if I still am saying people commit suicide at high rates, or HIV continues to be spread rampant across the community? If we're still experiencing employment discrimination, housing discrimination, why the hell do I care if I can get married, right? Yeah. And the moment marriage equality passed, all these organizations that popped up, a lot of them folded. A lot of them, rather than reallocating their resources to HIV prevention or homelessness or mental health for queer people, they just dwindled away. Okay, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. Marriage equality was never about LGBTQ people's rights. It was some queer people's attempt to be heteronormative, to conform, because queer throughout history has always been a contrast to heteronormativity on purpose, right? Because heteronormativity isn't working. You know what I mean? It just isn't working, right? Men are just not taking care of themselves. They don't have hygiene, most of them. They don't know how to groom themselves because they have the condition not to, right? To be a man, and there's all these things around, and that's just a hyperbole, but like, it's true for some heteronormativity is so sensitive and so fragile that there are some men who put on social media, I don't wash myself properly because I don't want to touch my ass. You know what I mean? And so it's like, yo, what? Like, how is that gay? You know what I mean? So it's weird like that. And there are some people who, us queer folks, we always get kind of labeled as sexualized or hypersexual. But then there are straight people who are taking their young sons to sleep with sex workers to prove their manhood at a young age when it would be considered, statutory rape. And so I'm just like, how are we the ones sexualizing children and indoctrinating them when our entire lives we have been taught this is the way you should be, and we contradict that and build our own way, right?
Yeah.
And so I think about how heteronormativity really impacts us in the workplace because professionalism is rooted in heteronormativity. This is what is expected of men, of women, and there is nothing in between.
I think the expectations and the shoulds are really important because it shapes the way of how we assimilate. Going back to the example of you showing up in like a suit and whatever the idea of a professional is supposed to look like is one thing, but it's interesting that even in that example, you said to the person was like, yo, this is just me right now. Like, if you hire me, this is what you should expect. I'm going to come in
Right.
looking like X, Y, and Z, right? There's one thing to say it, but I'm curious about the experience of you actually doing it, right?
Oh, I did it.
Yeah, no,
So my first day, I wore a white blouse, a cream blouse with a black cardigan that was long, and a white and black and white plaid pant that was high waisted, a capri type thing, and then some black shoes. And after she told me what she told me on my first day of the work, I was like, bet, let me see if she really meant it. I think the next day I wore a dress, and I just did it throughout my entire years at John Jay. Actually, when I didn't wear makeup, some people got worried. Like, you okay? And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you're not wearing makeup. And I was like, like that's weird. But because they just got so expected to me, having the nice outfits and the nails and the makeup. They got used to all the glam. But that's not, makeup is not forever. You know what I mean? Like, I don't tattoo it on my face. It washes off. There are some days when I don't feel like putting it on. There's some days where I need to put it on. There's some days when I don't have to, right? And I feel fine not putting it on. And so, I think I did it. And I will say when I met with the vice president, who has become a great mentor of mine, Lynette Cook Francis, she said to me during my interview with her, because I had to do a round with her before I got the offer. And it was more of she trusted my director to pick me, to make the right person. She just wanted to meet with the person before they joined the team officially.
Yeah.
And so I met with her and I was super nervous. And, at that point, she was the only Black woman in senior leadership. It was mostly white men. And the president of the college, Jeremy Travis, is obviously a white man. And then she said to me, she's like, I believe that representation matters. And she was like, I want my team to reflect the students we serve. And John Jay is very diverse. It's a minority serving institution, it's a Hispanic serving institution. Most of the students are Pell Grant eligible and first generation students. And it's also a big pipeline for law enforcement and criminal justice field and law. And so, I I really appreciate that. I felt, and this is why I love New York City, right? Because I don't think this experience would have happened anywhere else. But I would hear Spanglish and Spanish and English throughout the halls, and no one batted an eye, right? It was expected. It was the norm. Cafe Bustelo was ever flowing. You know what I mean? Like it was just like, hello. You know what I mean? Especially in my little area in the suite that I was in. Coffee, Cafe Bustelo was flowing. You know what I mean? And so I really loved my time at John Jay. It was actually hard to leave John Jay. I didn't make that decision lightly. And so, what I think is what happens oftentimes is that, and this is when I knew I was doing the right thing at John Jay, when an alumni came back, it was a trans woman, and she was just innocently walking past my office, and my door was open. It tends to be open. And she like double backed and she looked at me and she's like, hello. And I was like, hi. And I think I was wearing a dress and makeup. I was like visibly gender nonconforming that day. And she was like, I've never in my life seen someone like you at John Jay. I wish you would have been here when I was a student. And I get chills thinking about that because
same,
like people need to see themselves reflected. And I've made it my mission in my career as a professional storyteller to tell stories that reflect not just our shared humanity, but our experiences that coincide and intersect, like
Yeah.
my first collection on Amazon, Drafted and Perfect Collection of Writing, is 15 years worth of writing in one book. And ironically, that little book has gotten me into doors that I otherwise may not have been into. And I made all the money I invested in the book back, right, which is great. And so I was recognized in New York City at Alibi, at a gay bar. If my book, if my TEDx talk, if my blog, if my dance pieces, if just one person sees themselves and chooses not to end their life and chooses not to give up on their dreams, then that would be my legacy.
Yeah, I get chills thinking about it because I've had people on the podcast that have self-identified as queer, and they say things like, I'm scared to put on my LinkedIn profile that I was like the treasurer for the pride group in college. At work, when I show up, I try to do my best to not let my coworkers know that I'm queer. And what they do, and you can go back to the episodes, but what they've said is like, I try to only show my masculine side, the traditional masculine side, if you will, right? Like I have a quote unquote feminine side, but I don't show that at work because even the gay people or the queer people that are at work, they don't show that side because that doesn't align with professionalism, right? Or
Right.
what we think is professionalism, but it's true. Like by you being yourself, it almost gives someone else permission. It was like, oh shit, Mark's doing that? Shit, watch me tomorrow. But I'm
Right.
wondering
Right.
for you though, right? Because you didn't have the representation in that institution to give yourself
No.
permission. So give me a sneak peek into the potential anxieties or the nervousness or maybe even the fear in that moment. Or was the permission that you needed the people that were interviewing you literally telling you, yo, I want you to be yourself?
Yeah, that helped me at John Jay. That helped me. My time at William Patterson, I was so well known on that campus. From the president down to the janitor, everyone knew who I was on that campus, right? So
Yeah.
everyone was very protective of me. Everyone had my back. I remember one day I was in the dining hall and someone, I don't want to say the F word, but it's FAG.
Mhm.
And and I was shocked because at that point, it was in the 20 between 2010 and 2014, I was in college.
Mhm.
And so, within that point, there was a lot of progress being made, but like there was still a lot of homophobia and queer antagonism on college campuses across the country. And so I remember my friend who was sitting next to me, who's really my other friend's, his girlfriend is my friend, and he was just, my associate. He popped up ready to fight on my behalf. And he's a white guy who's super masculine, who just really cared about me and really wanted to protect me in that moment. And I said, like, please don't fight. Like, please don't get yourself in trouble on my behalf. But that's when I realized, right, that like I was so protected in undergrad and when I started my career at William Patterson, that leaving William Patterson was really scary for me because I thought to myself, what if I don't have the same support in other spaces, right?
Yeah. Like
But
even though someone is telling you like it's okay, it's like you said,
right,
you were like, I'm gonna test them. I'm gonna show up
yeah,
as myself. But were you nervous at all?
I was super nervous. I was more nervous during the interview process because I thought it was going to count against me. And I remember talking to my supervisor after I got the job. Obviously, I said to her, I was like, I was really nervous during my interview, and she like, it didn't seem like you were nervous. She was like, you rocked it, and I was like, thanks. And she was like, and we loved your nails. And she said I couldn't stop looking at them because she was like, I wish my nails looked that good. And I thought to myself, yo, that could have counted against me at a different institution,
Yeah. Because
right? Because
didn't
it could have distracted them from the content and the worth of my experience, because they would have just boiled down to, oh, he looks pretty, right? Oh, he looks good. And it was such a contrast to even though it was neutral in color, it was still, it was obvious that I had nails. And so, it was such a contrast to the black suit and tie appearance, right?
Mhm.
And so I made a decision. And again, I told you authenticity is a daily decision, right?
Mhm.
And so I remember when I was interviewing for a role in Jersey City, this is before I moved to New York City. Um, I was really nervous. So first of all, 2 years after I started that job at John Jay, or a year and a half after I started that job at John Jay, um, that suit that I put on for the other interview, it didn't fit the same way. I was real tight. I was like, ooh, I gained some weight. They don't talk about the professional freshman 15. When you're a professional 15, when you start working and you have lunch every day outside with coworkers or whatever, you go out for happy hour. They don't talk about that weight, but that's a different story. But I remember feeling so uncomfortable throughout the entire interview process. I remember I made it all the way to the final round. with I believe she was the vice president of academic affairs, something like that. And she was so rude to me. And she did one of those gotcha moments. And she was a white woman. And this was to be fair, this was a religious affiliated school. And so I was like, oh, whatever. And I told the director I'd be reporting to. I was like, this is who I am. I'm queer, blah blah blah. And he was a black man. He seemed okay with it, but I wasn't getting the vibe that institution was going to support me in the same way John Jay has. So then when I met with the VP of academic affairs and she did that gotcha moment, I was like, oh, she's not really interested in my development. She's not interested in someone like me working here.
What
Even though
was the
it was
gotcha moment? Like, how did you know?
oh yeah, it was a gotcha moment because she was talking about, so the position was like a um student success coach or something like that. It was like a for the trio program. And its trio is very similar to EOF in that regard. And so there was a moment about registration, it was an advisement registration question. And she kind of framed it in such a tricky way. It was just a gotcha moment. I can't remember verbatim what she said, but it was just like it just felt like she was like, oh, like she was just like, once that moment happened, the interview, she disengaged with me. She wasn't very warm. She wasn't very welcoming. And so I couldn't tell whether that was because I was queer or because I couldn't tell what it was. But I was like, you know what, F this. So I didn't get the job, which was no surprise. And I was proud of myself for making it that far. And so I devoted myself to staying at John Jay, and I kept trying to pivot at John Jay to different roles outside of communications. But I became known as the communications guru. I became known as the person who knew how to communicate with students well, through various platforms, emails, social media, things like that. So people they couldn't see me outside of that. And so I knew I had to pivot in my career to make it out and to grow. And so that's what I did. But John Jay still has a very special place in my heart, and I don't know if everyone feels this way about their first professional role out of college. So I feel very fortunate to still have relationships with people. I mean, I was on committees with the president of the college, Carol Mason, and I was talking to the senior leadership team. Like, people just knew who I was, right? And again, it felt very similar to my time at William Paterson. And so I love working in higher ed, but I had to pivot out.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about your experience is that it's a combination of, like, quote unquote corporate academia, but also you've done so much work on the side to empower your community, build that representation that in many ways, maybe you wish you had when you were younger. I'm curious for you, we're not done, right? I love what you said about, like, it being a daily decision. Just because I was authentic yesterday doesn't mean that I'm comfortable being authentic today, right?
Right.
But as you
But also, as a safety, sorry to interrupt you, but to answer the other part of the other question you asked me earlier around safety and fear, every day, right? So the decision I made to be authentic means accepting the anxiety and fear that may come with me walking outside the street or going to the airport. I'm flying to Texas today, a state that is very anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ, right? Granted, Houston's pretty progressive, Dallas is pretty progressive, and Austin's pretty progressive. But that's like Atlanta and Georgia, right? Like, Atlanta's really progressive, but the rest of Georgia ain't. So when I made the decision to be myself, to be authentic, I know that comes with risk. But I'm gonna tell your listeners and you what I told my mother many years ago when I was in high school, especially in college. I said to her, I'd rather die living in my truth than live a life of a lie.
And what
I'd rather
inspires
die living in my truth than living a life that is a lie.
what inspires you to continue living in that truth?
That stubbornness has really saved me. I mean, it hurts me sometimes, but for the most part, it has saved me. It has saved me in my career. It has saved me in my personal life, just being, and I know sometimes we see people who are stubborn as problematic, but there is something to be said about someone who refuses to dim their light. Hell, the moon can be surrounded by darkness and it never dims its light. Think about that. Surrounded by darkness, the moon never dims its light. And so why should I? Whether personally or professionally, why should I dim my light?
Yeah.
And it's that level of transparency. Oh, I'm getting emotional thinking about that. But yeah, there's you ever say something like, damn, that's deep, Mark. Sorry. But I think about people like you, right? I think about people like you and your transparency. And, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I know you do, but if others follow me on LinkedIn, they know that I talk a lot about mental health and, my experiences with mental health and all that. I'm very vulnerable on that platform because I know it can help people. It can change conversations, right? I do a lot of diversity, equity, inclusion work. And, I really appreciate people like you who are really empowering others to be transparent. I heard your I Quit episode and I thought to myself, like, yo, he is just fearless. When I saw that initial post that you quit, I was like, he done lost his mind. I was like, and even I took a moment and I was like, I heard that J-Lo song, My Love Don't Cost a Thing. And
Ooh.
I was like, and I replaced the word my love with my mind,
Mm,
my spirit, right?
mhm.
Because you can't put a price tag on your mental health and your happiness. If those two things suffer for the sake of money, honey, I've learned that money and success and accolades, right? And titles, they don't hold you at night. They don't cuddle with you and whisper great things in your ear.
That's a fact.
So when you come home every day or you unplug for the day and all you left with is who you are as a person, are you happy?
Mm-hmm,
Do you feel held? And so if a job, if a professional experience is not uplifting you and amplifying your voice and supporting your happiness, right? No amount of money is worth that. And I hope that people who hear that episode, I quit from your podcast, I hope that it dares them to free themselves, right? And of course, you have a lot of privilege for the amount of salary you're making and your ability to save up and build a safety net so you can kind of go full time with your own organization, your own business. I know I said to you privately, but I feel like it's important to mention publicly is that, you know, your career, your business is going to take off. And I know that in my bones, because when you're authentic, right? When you show up as yourself, you are allowing for more human connection. If those two things suffer for the sake of money, honey, I've learned that money and success and accolades, right? And titles, they don't hold you at night. They don't cuddle with you and whisper great things in your ear.
That's a fact.
So when you come home every day or you unplug for the day and all you left with is who you are as a person, are you happy, right? Do you feel held? And so if a job, if a professional experience is not uplifting you and amplifying your voice and supporting your happiness, no amount of money is worth that. And I hope that people who hear that episode, I quit from your podcast, I hope that it dares them to free themselves, right? And of course, you have a lot of privilege for the amount of salary you're making and your ability to save up and build a safety net so you can kind of go full time with your own organization, your own business.
Yeah.
And I said to you privately, but I feel like it's important to mention publicly is that, you know, your career, your business is going to take off. And I know that in my bones, because when you're authentic, right? When you show up as yourself, you are allowing for more human connection. You are allowing for more people to see themselves through your experiences. At the end of the day, when we die, and we will die, right? That's the one guarantee in life, that we will be born and that we will die. That is a life cycle, right?
Yeah.
What happens in between is a bunch of uncertain things. And so for me, when I get to that point of transition in this lifetime, the awards won't go underground with me. Yes, I'll be known for this and known for that and whatever, and making history in the dance world. But what will be remembered of me is not just my professional success in my life, but how I lived and how I loved. No one goes into their deathbed and thinks, I wish I would have worked more.
No one. Never.
No, I mean, I've never heard that story, right?
Never.
And as a queer person, as a person with gender non-conforming, the likelihood of me being killed is much higher. I can go to Texas this weekend, and not make it back to Atlanta on Sunday night. And I hope I do, but that's the risk I take to be myself.